Look, you said that you were looking at all the different religions, yeah? Once again, you said you don't accept idolatry and stuff. I accept that, I believe in that as well, I agree with you. Look, the first thing I want to say to you is, from a Muslim perspective, from an Islamic perspective, yeah? Is that we would say the starting point for us is a very strict monotheism. Yeah, so for us, the starting point is like a monotheism, where we believe that there is an ultimate creator, sustainer, an ultimate power that initiated the universe, if that makes sense. Now, how feasible does that sound in your mind? How rational does that sound in your mind?
Yeah, I believe that the creator is what brings life to the material realm. The material realm is just an illusion. Okay? We can't take any of this stuff with us when we go. So the idea of an immortal God from which we all originate gives us purpose.
So you agree with that idea? You accept it, I mean? Do you believe in it?
The creator, the creator gives life to existence,
Right, okay.
I'm confused, though. You said you were an empiricist?
Empirical theology.
You believe in evidence?
Go on.
But if you haven't got evidence for God, how can you then believe in
I don't believe, I don't believe, for example, that the earth was created in 7 days. Because that's creation. There's a difference between a creator and creationism. Creationism is something different, okay? But as an empirical...
So you're saying you reject kind of like the biblical narrative, but at the same time you don't reject the idea of an all-knowing, all-powerful creative force that started the universe?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So alright, so what I was going to say now, since that's the case, now we have to define some of the attributes of this creator, yeah? Would you accept that some of the attributes are creative capacity or power or knowledge? Would you say that these are fundamental to such a force?
Yeah, of course. Creativity.
You're no longer on your own YouTube now, you're on Muslim YouTube. I understand.
Yes. Muslim YouTube. So what? Okay. You're saying it's the creative essence of the universe and of individual souls. That is God. I completely agree. How can we? Intuition, for example, this is a fundamental metaphysical function of our personality, our soul. How can we? We can't program a machine, for example, to do these things. So how can we ever prove that this exists outside of this?
Yeah, it's good. All right. So having said that, I want to ask you a question. What's the most appropriate relationship you can have with such an entity?
The most appropriate relationship is one of harmony, essentially. Okay? Essentially, when you live in harmony with mankind and with the planet, you are living in harmony with God. There is no separation between the effects that you enact upon the world and what comes to you, what moral consequences.
Okay, I accept that to a certain extent. Let me tell you something. We have our own version of that, right? So we say, because if you look at the Eastern traditions, they do reference how to be one with God and these kinds of things. From our perspective, we say there is a way to basically be harmonious with the will of the Creator. And the way that works is basically, the Creator has created the creation, and in the creation you have animate and inanimate, right? As for the inanimate objects around us, they are forcibly or obliged to kind of submit to the will of the Creator, right? So basically, in other words, in order to be one with creation, in that sense, not in the sense of actual physicality, but we're talking in that figurative sense, the way to do that would be to do what everything else around you is doing. So everything around us, if you accept the premise of an all-powerful Creator, is submissive to that Creator. We would say by extension, it makes sense to also be submissive to the Creator in the same way that everything around us is being submissive. Does that make sense?
I completely agree, Submissive to, but we know...
the will of the Creator.
Exactly, the will of the Creator, but never to an authoritarian figure. That's why I'm so against idolatry. Because these false prophets or these dogmatic beliefs, these are not creations of God, but they're creations of human beings. And so never listen to a boss or something that doesn't agree with your own sense of morality that comes from within, but live in harmony with that intuition which comes essentially from God.
Right, so let me ask you a question, because the thing is, it becomes very subjective when it becomes clouded in that kind of terminology. I'll be honest with you. Because what we would say is that if essentially our aim in life is to be submissive to God, right? In the sense that I've just aforementioned. If that's the aim of life or the purpose of life, surely there should be a uniform way, a universal way, that God has allowed human beings to be able to do that.
A uniform, I agree.
Yeah. So now, we would say this is the Islamic narrative. I'll be completely straightforward with you. Yeah. The Islamic narrative is that the way that happens is that the Creator communicates with the creation, and He does so through prophets who have come before time. Yeah. So prophets are a necessary extension of what is necessary to happen or appropriate between the Creator and the creation. Or in this case, human beings specifically, who are sentient beings and able to make their own decisions on free-willed creatures. So there was a need for prophets. There was a need for the communication between the Creator and the creation. And so prophets came before time. The Islamic narrative is that so long as humans were on earth, there were prophets preaching the message of what we'd call submission. Yeah. So people like Adam, you might have heard of these kind of biblical names, Adam and Noah and Moses and Jesus. All of those are prophets that came to their respective peoples and their respective times and preached the message of submission to their peoples. Does that make sense?
Completely, yeah.
Right. So what we would say is that the messengers came fundamentally with two different things. They came with a message and they came with an evidence base to substantiate that message. So in the case of Moses, you might have heard of these stories of basically, the sea splitting and all these kind of different things. Yeah, it's in the Old Testament. It's also in the Quran. These stories are meant to indicate that these are evidences, yeah, that are used to prove the message of submission, because there's something which break the natural capacity of physical reality around us. So there are evidence that basically God is the author of the message that these prophets come with. Now, whereas all of the prophets and messengers were sent to their respective...
Can I ask you,
yes.
is this sea splitting? Why is that? Why does that give evidence that this is the word? What's that got to do with Muhammad, for example, the seas?
Right. So no, the sea splitting doesn't have anything to do specifically with Muhammad's message, but it's, although it is in the Quran, we're talking specifically about Moses. So in his time, and this is an interesting thing that there's actually been alluded to by some of our scholars in Islam, that depending on the societal kind of what's societally popular at the time, the evidence base that the messengers come with suits that. So at the time of kind of the young what do you call it, the Middle Empire, wherever it is in Egypt, when Ramses II was there, and they say that Ramses is linked to Pharaoh and whatnot. Let's mention the Bible. At this time, they were fascinated with magic and all these kind of things. Now, Moses came with you could call it a miracle really, which basically broke the rules of physical nature, yeah, and which acted as an evidence for his people. So when people saw it, they said, okay, well, this makes sense. Do you see what I'm saying? Right. So for us now, we will say, what's our miracle, right? Because we need some evidence as well to be able to substantiate the claim that Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger, because that's our claim. Our claim is that Prophet Muhammad, whereas all of the other prophets were sent to their people and their times, Jesus, Moses, etc., Abraham, Muhammad was sent for all peoples and all times. So that's the Islamic narrative. So what he's come with is he's come with an auditory miracle, or an auditory evidence base, whereas all the prophets came before usually with a visual evidence base. So like, for example, in the case of Moses, the sea splitting was something for human beings to visualize and see. Whereas what we say is the evidence base for the Islamic message is actually the Quran itself, which is something actually which was transmitted orally, although it does have, of course, written books as well to corroborate and triangulate the veracity of the oral message. So here, the Quran has many different things within it which basically would lead someone to believe that it couldn't have been, because you were saying you use a kind of like rationalistic approach. We're using a probabilistic kind of rationalistic approach. I would argue that the Quranic discourse contains within it an evidence base.
Can I just interrupt you there? I'm actually not a rationalist, I'm an empiricist, which
okay,
is
sorry, yeah.
antithesis
of rationalism. Oh yeah, I think I got mixed up then. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't just we need experience to inform our...
I think you're right about that as well. And that's why, by the way, the fundamental thing in Islam is as follows. One of the fundamental messages Islam comes with is as follows. Whereas Christianity says we're born with original sin, yeah? Islam says no, we're born with something called the fitrah. The fitrah is a predisposition to basically submit to God, not only to know who He is, that higher power, but to submit to Him automatically. So this presupposition is awakened by the various messages or the various evidences that human being is thereafter exposed to. So human being is, for example, exposed to the fine-tuning of the universe. And you don't have to be a physicist to appreciate the fine-tuning of the universe. You can literally look with your naked eye at the fact that the universe is, in fact, finely tuned, right? And these kind of things aim to reawaken human beings from the state of slumber into the recollection of God.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing of the Islamic message. As with the Quranic discourse, as we've said before, it has within it evidences, we would say, which are very powerful in convincing people that this is basically something which has to be extra human. In other words, it couldn't have been put together by a human ability. So we would say, for example, the fact that the Quran precisely discusses events that happens in the future. And I'll give you one example of that. At the time of the Prophet, there were the Romans and the Persians. And the Quran makes very specific predictions about who will win wars. And in the case of chapter 30, verse 1 to 6, it talks about the Romans decisively going to beat the Persians in 3 to 9 years in a nearby land. Now this is one of many different predictions of the future that the Quran makes, and that the Sunnah, which is the secondary book of the corpus that Muslims believe in, or the Hadith, the strong Hadith, make of the future. And from a probabilistic perspective, we can say, okay, well, probably if someone says one thing or two things, they might have guessed them to be correct. But if we put them all together, it becomes very, very difficult to make the argument that he guessed all of those correct. Especially when we consider, by the way, did you know, let me tell you something. In Jehovah's Witness, in the Church of the Jehovah's Witness, you know, they predicted, and by the way, they believed in this kind of thing where people were being, you know, divinely inspired. They predicted that the Day of Judgment will be in the year 1977. You know that. And when that year when the Day of Judgment didn't happen on that year, they called it the Great Disappointment. Because, I mean, I don't know why anyone would be disappointed for the Day of Judgment not happening, but they called it the Great Disappointment. The reason why is because the prediction didn't materialize. And that has repercussions and ramifications for the message, because it couldn't have been divine if it didn't materialize, because it was meant to be from an all-knowing source.
Can I ask you about the Quran? You know, they're saying the Quran predicted the Romans were
going to defeat the Persians, yeah.
What wasn't the Romans? Didn't the Roman Empire fall before?
The Roman Empire fell at or you're talking about the Holy Roman Empire. I'm not talking, first of all, there's two Roman empires, right? So the Roman Empire started in the year 31 BC, yeah? The Gallic Wars and stuff like that, whatever, and it continued on. But then the Holy Roman Empire started, okay? Now, the Byzantine Empire, which was what was around at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and continued on until the 1400s, this is what we're referring to.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. But the Roman Empire, as you would have known from the history lessons that you'd have done, were in constant wars with the Sassanid empires, or they're also called the Sassanians, something like this, yeah?
Right.
Basically the Persians. And this was referred to in the Western history books as the Roman Sassanid Wars. Now, the point is, the Roman Empire, as you would have known, from the year 400 onwards, and the Prophet came around 630, you know, around that time, so from the 7th century. But from that year, from that time period, it was going down. There was a degeneration of the Roman Empire anyways. And so the Sassanid Empire was much stronger. So when the Quran made the claim that the Roman Empire was going to beat the Sassanid Empire in 3 to 9 years in a nearby land, all these different things, it was a kind of ridiculous claim if you think about it from a probability perspective. It's the equivalent of betting on a very low team, maybe in the Champions League, beating a very high team, maybe in the top 5 in the Premier League, right? And betting that they will beat them in a certain way, in a certain place, in a certain time period, and all these different things. So probabilistically, the odds are very low for that. And that's one example, but there are many different examples. For example, the conquest of Arabia by the Muslims. The fact that other nations will fall into the hands of the Muslims, like Egypt and Yemen and Syria and Jordan, you know, and Pakistan and India, Sindh wal Hind, and all these different places which are now part of the Islamic Empire, have been predicted to be conquered by Muslim hands, basically. So all of these things, when we put this into a probability generator, it becomes very difficult to argue that this all could have been guessed. And I would actually argue and make a very daring claim here and say this kind of frequency and accuracy of predictions has never been predicted by anyone. I don't know of any human being. If you want to bring Nostradamus or the Jehovah's Witness or anyone that have made predictions of the future with this much frequency and detail, which have actually materialized in the way that they've materialized.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds quite interesting.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So here, when we say we have evidence for the veracity and the truthfulness of Islam, we're not just saying that we have kind of superfluous evidence or kind of arbitrary subjective type evidences. Our evidences are probably are actually can be analyzed objectively. Do you see what I'm saying? This is not regarding the fact that the Quran is also, in and of itself, a book that claims that it has no contradictions, a book that challenges mankind to produce a chapter like it, a book we would actually make the argument that the only ancient religious book which has been preserved in terms of its material, its corpus. The Muslims have never had a controversy, and this can go on the record, and believe me, I'm here every week, and they'll try and maybe, but I can say this completely clearly, the Muslims have never had a controversy on what constitutes the Quran. Never. It's never happened. They've had controversies on everything else, but they've never had a controversy on what constitutes the Quran. The Christians, on the other hand, they are differing on how many books are in the biblical canon. The Protestants say 72 books. The Protestants say 66. The Catholics say 72. The Eastern Orthodox say 81. So here, we don't even know how many books are in the Bible, let alone the manuscripts and these things. So here, what we're saying is not only do we have evidences that are analyzable, if that's a word, but also we have that which is necessary for a book to be a word of God, a preserved book, free from contradiction and unimitable. So with that, do you see the power of the argument?
Yeah, no, I believe that it's a bit like when you buy a software for the first time and you install updates.
Yeah.
It's like Christianity came along, that was one update, and we've had Islam, that was the final.
I think that's a good way.
The thing is that the only problem was in any religion is violence, as you know.
Yes.
We've always seen this violence in all religions. I'm not trying to blame any.
Yes, yeah.
I think that the only problem is that the thing that people blame Islam for is why are they so violent in that area?
Yeah.
They have to kind of look at themselves.
You're right.
The Western intervention. We also have to
Exactly.
That area of the world has been a kind of hodgepodge of different civilizations. Like you had Rome to the west, you had the Mongols, the Arabs, all competing, going, and of course that violence is very harmful to empiricism, and it causes arguments. Shia Islam, Sunni Islam.
Yeah, but okay, I accept what you're saying. You're right. Violence is never a good thing, but that's
that's what I'm saying. In defense of Islam, when people accuse Islamic world of being so violent, look at the cultural context with it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we look at the raw data, you'll find that in terms of population, I would actually make the argument that Muslim people, as a proportion of the population, are probably the least violent. I know that sounds ridiculous. In the last 100 years, they have proven to be the least violent people in the world in terms of religion. Why? And this is going to sound ridiculous. Some guys laughing their head off at home there, believe me. But if you count the amount of people that have died as a result of the imperialistic wars of World War I, World War II, also if you count the 4 wars of America, and if we consider state violence as a kind of violence, which there's no reason for us not to, we'll come to the conclusion that the most violent people have been atheists like Stalin and others, and Christians. If you consider Hitler a Christian, I don't know what he considered himself, and people like him, and so on and so forth. Islam actually fares reasonably in the grand scheme of things as a proportion of the population, especially if we talk about the colonial period, because most of the Muslim world was subjugated under the colonial Western rule. It fares actually quite well. But having said that, because of kind of the post-Cold War terroristic backlash that we've been getting, and the focus on terrorism, so a lot of people now will think of Islam as a violent religion. But we shouldn't think, just looking at the raw data, of Islam as any more or less violent as other world faiths who have proponents of those faiths actually performing more violence in the span of the last 100 and 150 years than Muslims. But going back to what I was saying that look, we have an argument for basically the truthfulness of Islam. Yeah? I'm not going to lie to you. I just want to be straightforward with you. Yeah, because I like you. You know, you're a nice guy. You dress well. You know, I came here I didn't even dress properly today. You know, what I mean? So I just came. You know, I wasn't gonna come today, but I'm happy I did because I had a conversation with you. Yeah. Listen to me. I'm going to tell you directly. I believe that the purpose of life is to worship God through submission. Not only is that the case, I believe that the guidelines for human beings is therefore the Quran, because it's the final book for the reasons I've mentioned. So if we want to live a fruitful life which is in compliance with the will of God, it's got to be done through the injunctions of the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, I've given you the reasons why, like I've given you somewhat of an epistemological base as to why we believe in what we believe. Do you accept that epistemological base that I've given you is an argument which can be accepted or should be accepted based on the evidence that's put forward?
I agree completely. I think that unless someone comes up with a more up-to-date version of truth, theological truth,
yes,
I suppose it makes sense to accept that as the most up-to-date.
Fantastic. So what we can do is we can do the Shahada, right? Now the Shahada is the declaration of faith. Now do you believe in what I've just said? Do you agree that the Quran is probably the word of God based on what I've told you?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you do now is it's good now to become a Muslim. And what the word Muslim actually means is someone who submits their will to God. As we've said in the beginning, that's the whole point of it. And what I'll do is I'll give you my number, and me and you will discuss more, like, you know, how to kind of perform your rituals and these kind of things. We'll get you a package of things to do and watch and stuff like that. We'll take it easy on you. But how do you feel? Should we go for it?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't call myself not a Muslim. I'm already practicing Muslim in many respects, so
yes.
It's nothing new for me, but I would very, very much like that, yeah.
Would you like that? Okay, let's do it then. So I'm going to say it in Arabic, you answer, you just kind of follow what I say, and then I'll say it in English, okay?
Yeah, you say
yeah, I'll say it in Arabic first. So follow what I say. Ashhadu.
Wait, one second. You have to say it in English.
Yeah, I'll say it in Arabic, and then you say it in Arabic. And then, shall I say it in English first?
No, you say it in Arabic.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right. So, all right. So say, Ashhadu.
Okay, what does it mean though first?
Oh, okay. So.
No, you can't, I can't say it.
Oh, right, sorry. I'll say it first. So what you're going to say is, I bear witness that there's only one God worthy of worship, being submissive to, which is, we believe, the God that we talked about. Yeah, and that the Prophet is the final messenger.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Ashhadu alla ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Well done. Now you're part of the family, my friend. Welcome to Islam. How you doing? Well, now.
Nice to meet you on Eid as well. You accept Islam, mashallah. Alhamdulillah.
Well, we're all here, brothers and sisters.
No sins on your slate. No sins on your slate.
So now you're.
Every week somebody.
Alhamdulillah.
Every week somebody.
Listen.
Started on a video and he ended up in Islam. Every single week, God bless it.
Alhamdulillah, we keep it going, man. We keep it going, guys, and contribute to it.
Alhamdulillah, listen, I'm going to give you my number off camera. And then you can call me for anything you need, yeah? And by the way, we're probably going to get something to eat afterwards, so you're definitely invited. Today's Eid, by the way, it's one of the extensions of Eid, so you're already in a Muslim celebration, isn't it? All right, do you want me to give you my number? Have you got your phone with you?
MashaAllah. Smart man.
Muhammad.
Yeah, Simon.
Assalamu alaikum, man, to the camera, bro.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Make sure to subscribe to the guy's page.